Hello and welcome to week 35 of the FUT Weekly Podcast. This is a gameplay episode and I'm joined, as I pretty much always am, by FUT legend AirJapes. Welcome back.
Thank you much, Ben. Happy to be back and chatting. Hoping to get some meaty tips this week to improve my own gameplay, which is admittedly struggling at the moment, Ben. It's a rough run of it.
Even with the Team of the Season Bundesliga players you were enthusiastic about on that supporter content podcast this week, an early plug for that actually, and that 36,000 FIFA point giveaway, just search support FUT Weekly. But yeah, normally Japes, top NA player on this podcast, but it's different this week because we have an NA champion on this episode. Delighted to welcome DC United pro King CJ. Hello CJ, welcome.
Greetings everyone, it's a pleasure to be here alongside two very well-known people in the scene.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that does apply to Japes. I'm not sure about myself, but I'll take it. And we'll start off. Actually, it'd be interesting to know. You've never been on the podcast before. Just a bit of an introduction, I guess. Who is your favourite player from FUT you look back on with nostalgia thinking, oh, yeah, that was a good time?
I'm going to go quite far back. Probably FIFA 17, FIFA 18. I don't remember which title it was, but it has to be that player of the month, Suarez. That striker card was very good. Barcelona. I don't know if you guys remember.
Yeah, I do. That's not someone that I would expect to get mentioned, though. I mean, it's quite a niche one almost.
I'm just sitting over here feeling old, thinking 2017 FIFA is far back.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. That was the first year of champs, wasn't it? FIFA 17,
Yeah.
Which still, to me, feels quite new. And how did you become a pro? I mean, you are playing professionally for DC United alongside studying, right, as well?
So how that kick-started was I grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa. So my entire life, I've basically lived there with my family.
Right.
Until obviously my older brother moved to the US. He obviously used to be with us there. He moved for these studies. And I saw him getting to like professional FIFA in this side in the US. Started competing. There was a few events back then, like 𝘵𝘵 and stuff like that. So he got into that. And obviously, as every young brother does, he's like, okay, this looks kind of cool. I would like to give myself a shot. Started playing FUT Champs, the division back then. It was pretty competitive. Once you get to Division 1, it was quite a struggle. So I just got better and better, and one thing led to the other. I finished school there, moved to the US as well, and got picked up.
Yeah, that's incredible. Actually, I heard somewhere that you would have almost maybe gone professional at football itself.
That was earlier than when I was younger.
Okay.
So it was something called the district in South Africa, where like I don't know if you guys are familiar with Orlando Pirates.
Yep.
You have to be with the kit. So I used to play for a club where when you get at a certain age, they start selecting the best players in the country. And I got selected into that. But unfortunately, my parents said, nope, you're going to finish school. You're not doing anything about soccer. Don't think about that. Just focus on school. And FIFA was the next best thing, I guess, that could replace that kind of passion.
Yeah, and there was certainly passion on display when I faced you in Champs a week or two ago. I was like, I thought I could try and get something good out of losing my game for 16 wins during Prem Tots weekend. So it's worked out okay at the end. But at the time, I wasn't too pleased. I saw your name come up and I was like, oh, damn. Although I almost scored. I don't know whether you remember the game, but I almost scored in the first minute from a cutback. And if I had, maybe it would have been a little bit different. I don't think
Ben,
so.
I'm here to tell you that's not how it works when you play pro.
Yeah,
It's like it's not. You can score the kickoff goal if you want, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah. We can talk about some of the things that I picked up from that match, actually, perhaps now. One thing is tactics-wise. I noticed in that game, at least, you weren't playing a 5 at the back, which, as you said, is the meta at pro level. And you do play that competitively, right? So do you just like to play something different when you're playing slightly more casually, I suppose?
It's just about having fun. I feel like the 5-back forces you to play a certain style. You don't have a lot of options going forward. So you're basically relying on you triggering runs, triggering your left mid, playing the ball to your striker, waiting that your left mid breaks that last line, and then you play him in behind. Like that's the pro meta way to play. In weekend league, I always want to play like 4-3-2-1 or even 4-4-2, different formations. A formation that allows me to actually like
Play soccer.
do skill moves or exactly. Play soccer, exactly. Do skill moves, create different waves of scoring. That's how I want to play in weekend league. If I was to play 5-for-1 in weekend league, it would drive me mad. Just being serious right now.
Yeah, I guess for me, as someone who prefers to like stay aggressive for the majority, like and that means like without the ball as well as with the ball, and I just like I have success when I play the 5-4-1. I just like kind of hate myself like while I'm doing it the whole time. Like I find it really dull to just like you don't ever like the move is to not like rarely pull players out of position too.
Literally.
And you just like let your back line sit. And I mean 3-backs function this way too once they get set up. But you just sort of like let them sit, compact it in, and then your whole goal is to play off the counter. Like
Literally.
and it's just really like it's dull to me. Ben, you've obviously heard me have struggles with like FIFA before where I'm, like a philosophical conflict with the game or whatever it might be, or just in like a rut or a lull. But this is one where I'm like, they've got to do something. And I don't think that the toolkit is there for this year's FIFA to be able to actually improve this. So I think this is just the state of the game right now. And, I guess we're fingers crossed that with the name change next year, it'll like magically improve, maybe.
Yeah, it's all about balancing, isn't it? And I feel like we've talked about this on the podcast quite a few times, so we don't want to go into it too much. We've got other things we can talk about. But, we were saying actually this year's game has less like things like the bridge or those like really annoying specific skill moves or whatever.
Directionals and stuff.
Directional nutmegs, yeah.
Skill cancel.
𝗪𝗪𝘀𝘀 was, skill cancels, 𝗪𝗪𝘀𝘀s, those kind of things. There was some stuff which was so clearly broken. And this year it's a little bit more ambiguous, but I think the thing that often comes up, right, is the first time through balls. And I noticed you certainly played a few against me in that game, right? Is that the main thing you'd point to, or is there anything else that you think is like really, really a problem?
You guys were mentioning the 𝗪𝗪𝘀𝘀 cancels, the directional nutmegs, but is this better than that? Like, for example, this meta, 5 players at the back, rather have something like a 𝗪𝗀𝘀𝘀 cancel or a directional nutmeg to counter it than just being here and waiting till your moment comes. This is why people only play for first time through balls. They play for first time through ball because they know there's consistency in creating that chance, and there's consistency in getting you in a 1v1 with the keeper, which is why people abuse it.
Yeah.
Another one, German cross. A German cross where you trigger your center mid, you run on the byline, wait till the center mid or anyone breaks that last line, and just send in a cross, and you power ball the header into the goal. Like, stuff like that wouldn't be so prominent if we had different ways and different tools to counter the metas we're facing.
One of the things that I always think is like interesting is the meta evolves over the course of the year as higher rated players are put into the game. Like, what is the pro level perspective on, obviously we're talking a lot about 5-back, which means defensive AI is like pretty strong. What is the like pro level perspective on AI utilization from, I suppose, like a defensive standpoint? Because we're talking a lot about mechanics in the game that create consistent high quality chances. And it seems like all of that is predicated on the defensive AI not knowing what to do with just those specific things. So I'm curious, like how you think about the defensive AI and relative to like manual control or manual defending.
So the way I could answer this question is basically by comparing it to previous years. I feel like the AI was stronger in 22, 21. Like those random AI blocks. think those happen a whole lot more in those previous titles. This year, the AI isn't as strong, in my opinion. It's not the AI the problem. The problem is that there's so many bodies behind that at a certain point, whether the opponent is holding second man press or just waiting till the right moment to switch to the right player, it just makes it harder because he's crowding the area. That's the only reason why it's very annoying to play these formations. It's not the AI that's particularly too strong. It's the way that the players are told to come back to their positions, come back on defense, right back, come back on defense, left wing back, come back on defense, right wing back, come back on defense. It just closes the space. So people have to rely in different ways. For example, if I'm playing a 5-4-1 and I'm struggling, I'm going to say fair play. I'm going to give you the ball. I'm going to trigger one of my players and try and get you on the counter. That's the only way when your team is up. Because if you're sitting back, it's a problem.
That's interesting then, because it kind of sounds like the problem is the meta more than the game itself to some extent. Do you know what I mean? Like, because you could play that way if you wanted to last cycle or the year before, but people didn't play that way. So what is the reason for it being so popular this year compared to previous
It's a tough one. It's a tough one because like last year we obviously had a different version to the 5-back. I feel like every game cycle we start off good, people playing regular formations, 4-2-3-1, 4-4-2, all that stuff. But every time, once we get to the middle cycle of the game, after Team of the Year, all that stuff, people start figuring out formation like the 3-5-2 last year, the 5-back this year, the 3-4-2-1 this year. People figure out formations where you can get as many bodies behind and attack with 7 players. That's the biggest issue. Being able to attack with 7 players and defend with your whole team, that doesn't balance out the game. And at a certain point, your team needs to be tired if that happens. That has to be a counter to these tough formations, I feel.
That's a good point. Yeah, I was actually saying that last week, that it is about the thing that makes a tactic OP is essentially how many players you can have in attack without it being detrimental to your defensive shape. And I think that's where maybe something about the way the game has been coded in terms of those 5-back formations and 3-back to an extent has just made that more effective than it has been in previous years. And yeah, you're right. Maybe there should be some kind of big stamina punishment, but then there's like 5 subs, isn't there? So it is tricky in that sense to balance it.
In my opinion, the best way, that's just my opinion. Obviously, the game does probably think about it more than I do. My opinion, the best way to counteract these formations is by changing the instructions. If you were to change the instructions, for example, the left mid and or the right mid not being able to come back on defense, I think that would help so much just by removing that option, personally.
I feel like the feedback to the development team or the gameplay team at EA has definitely been given that there need to be like instructions need to be improved. Perhaps there needs to be like a greater variety of instructions to counteract. Like when you put all these players back on defense, there, like I don't feel like there's a great set of instructions to like truly like counteract it. And I think the call out of like, hey, it's still a game, like it should be fun. Like what's really weird to me is when you play someone with like a 3-back with wingbacks, or excuse me, a 5-back with wingbacks versus like a 3-back with a left mid, right mid. If they have come back, like they sit in the exact same spot.
It's literally the same.
It's just, and so I think I was actually talking to 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦, and he was playing like a 3-back, and I was like, dude, you're playing a 5-back, and he's like, I'm not playing a 5-back. I was like, you're playing like it's not that like you have come back on all the outside players. You've got a flat back 5 line sitting there. Like that's ignore what the formation is called. If you have 5 players and they're the players closest to your keeper in a line, it's a 5-back formation, or it's a 5-back block, however you want to describe it. And as like the way you might consider attacking that, like in real football, is you might say, well, we can have players, have opposing wing backs perhaps, or outside backs press up a little bit and send in what are deemed to be like kind of early crosses, right? Because the outside mid or outside back can't press up on that. But you are disincentivized from playing that ball into the box because your team is just going to get hit on the counter in that instance. So like the options there just don't, like, it just ends up not making sense. And part of me believes the like true challenge here is, if you look at like real football, real soccer, the teams that are going to set up in a super defensive block and a 5-back do not have oftentimes the level of attackers that they might when you see in like Ultimate Team. And so when those teams like are trying to like play out on the counter and run on the breaks, one, they're going to have a tougher time like collecting passes or like hitting the right passes to play on a break in that same way. And in FIFA, that just doesn't exist because you're playing the ball to mph and he's just going to run. You know what I mean? Like PSG plays a low block like that, and like it oftentimes works, but even then it doesn't work to the same extent.
Because like Messi and Neymar aren't tracking back, right? Where you can make them track back in
FIFA.
And they're really good tacklers for some reason, right?
Like I'm playing 5-back and my right wing back is Ginola. He's literally the best defender I have.
Yeah, I think that is another huge issue with the game.
Just listen to that. I like respect it for being what it is, but like if I'm putting myself in EA's shoes here, and I'm looking at my game and going, these guys seemingly, like with the pro players, believe that using a player like Ginola in a position deemed to be a generally defensive position is like the most effective move. Like that, like something's not working appropriately with that formation.
Yeah. They did a patch in the summer last year, and I really hope they bring that forward to somewhere where it's going to have more impacts, during team of the season. It'd be nice to see some kind of gameplay change. But
candidly, Ben, this year, my general belief would be that there's a lot of energy going towards EA Sports FC and new features or addition. Like unless the developers are saying we want to test something ahead of next year. Yeah. Before we to get confidence to put it in the game. Unless they're saying that, I'm not counting any chickens because they have to come out with a game that is deemed not broken at the start. It has to be a roaring success off the bat so they can give a giant middle finger to FIFA.
Yeah, well, hopefully. And we'll be covering all build up to FC 24, as I'm sure it'll be called, in the not too distant future now. July is when we'll hear about it first. But yeah, we'll get into more gameplay tips for FIFA 23 right after this break. Hello, listener. If you'd like more FUT Weekly content this week, then the supporter content episode is the place to go. We talk about the Bundesliga team of the season, and you can also listen to plenty of other episodes if you fancy supporting over on the Patreon. You get double the podcast content every week, an extra episode. And it really keeps the podcast going. And at the moment, it's a great time to sign up because there is that 36,000 FIFA point giveaway, which, you have a pretty decent chance of winning compared to most giveaways, actually. So check that out if you would like to. Just type in bit.ly/TOTS in capitals 23. Or you can follow the link in the description of this podcast, or just search support FUT Weekly. It really does make a huge difference. It keeps the podcast going. And, there used to be a time when the FUT Weekly podcast couldn't be done weekly, and now it can, in fact, twice weekly for supporters. If you are one of those supporters, a huge thank you for supporting. And if you're considering it, a huge thank you too. Right, let's get back into the podcast with part 2. Hello, welcome back to part 2. We're going to be getting into some gameplay tips here. And just leading on from what we were talking about before, one of the things that I would say is notable is that the attacking AI is stronger when you're countering than when your opponent is set up, and you can create those one-on-one opportunities. Finishing them, though, can be difficult, and I wondered whether you yourself, CJ, had any particular tips for people finishing one-on-one situations, because it's something people ask about quite a lot.
I'll be honest, even I struggle with 1v1s to show how hard it is. In competitive games, or in the name in general, people say I create so much. But I miss half of my chances. I feel like this year, the way the keeper moves is so weird. He's so fast off his line. He can move left to right. So you have to basically take a gamble. All right, I think he's going to move. Let me shoot near post. I think he's going to stay. Let me shoot far post. So what I've been told to do is low driven. And that's what I've been doing lately, and it's actually working. Just tap the circle button. Just tap it. When you get in a 1v1 situation, it's like the keeper has a weird animation where he cannot get to it. Unless he has the save with feet trait, which only a few have.
Yeah. That is good. So in those situations, are you like shooting across the keeper for the low driven, or can you do near post too? Does it not really matter?
You can do both. Like there's certain situations where like obviously your body's opened up to shoot far post. So you can tap it goes far post, but at the same time your opponent might move his keeper. So if you move his keeper, you tap in your post, he basically cannot get to it.
That makes sense. And actually, I mean, I guess the other one is 𝗪𝘀𝗻𝘀𝘁 𝗔𝗽.
The
chip. I mean, it is working pretty well, right?
No, it does. It does work. The chip does work. I don't do it much for some reason, but I need to get back to it, actually. I just rely on greening my shots. Like, in my head, the way it's computed in my head, once you get into those positions and you green it, there's just shouldn't be a world where the player misses the target or does not end at the back of the net.
Yeah, it is pretty consistent this year, isn't it? Green timing, though. I mean, I feel like it's actually something that people do consistently now, whereas in previous years, actually, it wasn't something people necessarily were bothering with. Whereas you do, well, actually at the pro level, I guess it's always been worth that extra margin, just squeezing out that small advantage. But I think a lot more committed players who play the game not at a pro level do tend to green their shots, and I always give it a go, like, because if you're late it doesn't really matter, so I always try and time every shot, but it doesn't always happen. But yeah, some of the very, very good players I've played are definitely green timing pretty much everything, and you can in one-on-ones, can't you, just power shot green time, and if they haven't brought the keeper out too far, I think it works.
Power shots, that's something I've been actually incorporating in my gameplay. I've been doing it a lot, like just casually and fun, because I've seen people get success with it.
Yeah,
they do it from super far. They do it after a rainbow flick. Like now we're entering another discussions of broken mechanics.
The power shot on the rainbow flick is like actually kind of gross, but
it's funny. I was about to say, we should give props because power shot, I think, is a good mechanic added this year. But yeah, it can also be exploited.
Like I feel it gets that extra percentage. For example, let's say a power shot, it's all manual, so you are you have your own destiny at your hands. So when he does a rainbow flick, I kid you not, I think the percentage just increases for it to hit the target and to fly in the back of the net. I have tested it, and I'm like, I feel like the rainbow flick or anything that gives it an animation in the air gives it a consistent shot on the target.
The only story that I have with that is I had it done to me at one point, and I was like, well, that's broken. And I promptly went down and executed the exact same mechanic and scored a goal. And was like, okay, this is like, do I incorporate this into my game? Now, I tried it a few more times, and once someone knows it's coming, it's a lot harder to execute.
Yeah, it is. And in terms of other bits of advice, I was interested to know, because we had a question here about it, saying we're in the season of fine margins and wonder if the Gameplay Pod have any good penalty shootout tips. For example, I've noticed people tend to repeat their first penalty direction / technique in their last penalty, which could be a psychological thing. Is there anything else people use to gain an edge there? I definitely agree with that. It's something that I try and do is when there's an important penalty for your opponent, if you remember their first penalty they did, in fact, it may have been the one they did, if they got a penalty during the game as well, if you can try and save that penalty, you tend to be able to have some success, or certainly a higher chance of success compared to just doing whatever. I guess penalties are something that can decide competitive matches, CJ. I mean, it's a tough way for it to happen, but you must know a few little tips and tricks from that.
I've been in my own share of penalty shootouts.
Yeah.
Like life-defining moments even.
Well,
We're played in penalty shootouts. So one of the tips I would give personally, I use a random number generator. I use a generator that gives me 3 numbers: 1, 2, 3. 1 being left, 2 being the middle, and 3 being the right side. So whichever number the generator gives me, I fully back it because it gives you a different pattern. If you go by your own accord, you have a favorite side. And naturally, you tend to go on your favorite side, for example, for the game deciding pen, or when there's pressure, like you just saved the one you have to score. Normally, you go towards your natural side. So that's what I do when I take pens. Now, shooting pen, like saving pens is different. Obviously, you have to read your opponent. I like to go left to right, like bait him a bit, like sit right, wait for him to get the run up, get back into the middle, dive right again, like just mind games to try and get into your opponent's head. But yeah, I think saving is completely up to your feeling and how lucky you are, to be fair, because this year it doesn't take too much skill to score pens. You just have to put 3 bars, make sure the circle is close to the ball, and let it ride.
Yeah, and you think really there are only 3 ways you can shoot a penalty essentially this cycle, which I find, very weird, but it is true, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 3 ways. Either you chip it down the middle, chip it left, chip it right, or shoot power shots like middle, left, or right. There's no different way to shoot it.
Yeah, and then what about you, Japes? Any recommendations, or perhaps you don't want to share because 𝘬𝘵𝗽 might be listening?
No, I would say I like just debate when I should, like, my only thing that I think about on penalties is like when I should try to go down the middle. I guess I look at if my opponent is like shuffling all over the line, going back and forth, like I feel like chances are they're going to dive one way or the other. So I'm more inclined to go down the middle if I see my opponent doing that.
That's interesting because one of the things that I do is actually when you kind of load in the penalty sequence, I'll like shift slightly to one side, just slightly, and move back. And then when they're lining up their or when they're kind of considering a direction, which comes a little bit later, I'll also move slightly to one side and then back to the center to get them thinking that I'm going to move, and just do it very subtly so they think they've spotted it. You don't know they've spotted it, sort of thing. And then I'll stay in the middle.
I'm talking about shuffling.
But you're talking about full on like moving around, yeah.
I'm talking about people like using all the like happy clappy animations, going side to side, and like, which way am I going to go? And they're just eager on the sticks,
Yeah, that makes sense. And I just read that I think the advice that I would have given is what the question gave about watching out for what they want to try and do. But that number generation tip is a really interesting one. It's something that I'm definitely going to give a try because removing that kind of tendency is a really good thing to do, I think. Do you have any particular tips for like goalkeeper movement as well? Because I guess it's kind of a similar thing, isn't it, in a way? How do you kind of judge that or decide what you can do?
When people are basically in a good area or like in a good position in the box, obviously finesse shots is where like mostly you need to move the keeper. I usually double tap triangle to try and get him to move faster. Like, when you double tap triangle, he shifts to the side quicker.
I didn't know that actually.
So I do that when I want to move my keeper quickly when I can't move him with the stick. So I double tap a triangle and he just quickly shifts to one side and he makes a quick stop save if he has high reflex stats.
Is that to do with bringing the keeper out then in some ways? Like it moves them out?
Oh, it doesn't move them out. It literally shifts them. I don't know if you've been in a situation where your opponent you're running down the wing and you have a striker that's just peeling off your center backs. So when you're trying to make that cross, some people usually double tap triangle where they send their keeper fully out to try and claim that early cross. I don't know if you've been in that situation ever.
That's interesting. I honestly did not know that was even a thing. So obviously you can hold triangle to bring the keeper out, but you're saying the double tap just does something different basically.
Like a quick tap, like triangle.
Wow.
Quick tap, because if you hold it too long, it'll literally yank him out.
Yeah.
So if you tap it quickly, you quickly get him to shift to the other side to try and make a save.
Yeah, I thought double tap triangle was to send your keeper back when you started to charge them, but I have to give that a go.
Or move him in the net. You could also like just take the right stick, move him back in the net. The closer he is to his line, I kid you not, the closer he is to his line, he can make an easier save. The fact that he's in goal helps you sometimes for him to make save.
Another question for you is this one about player body types. So Killenham was asking which are your favourite areas of the pitch to have different body types. Which ones do you think offer an advantage? Are there any you'd look to avoid in specific situations? They seem to play a big role in what players consider valuable.
So I think the best example I could give in that situation, I mostly look at body type when it comes to defenders. Like, for example, the Van Dijk type of build, that's the type of build you want as a center back. And then you have players like 𝘍𝑝𝑟. 𝘍𝑝𝑟 has amazing stats every year. Like, he just got a new card recently, 91 pace and everything. But 𝘍𝑝𝑟's issue is that he's so skinny when you look at him. 𝘬𝘃𝗲𝗏, the same thing. These guys are so skinny and like it feels like they're not there. They're fast and everything. That's cool. But the moment you get into that position and the guy is trying to, let's say, do a skill move into you, they always tend to lose those 50-50 battles, which is why you prefer a Van Dijk type of build, who basically is unriggable, like they say.
Yeah, Van Dijk has a unique one, but Lucio is a good example because he actually has a generic body type, but it's just a big body type, I guess. But interestingly, 𝘍𝑝𝑟 actually has the same body type as him.
Really?
But I think it might be the difference in aggression potentially, which just makes him not so good. And defensive stats, I guess, to some extent. 𝘬𝘃𝗏 is a really good example, though, because he has a lean body type and is clearly skinnier than someone like 𝘍𝑝𝑟 or like Lucio. But I think you're absolutely right. From what I've heard from everyone who's come on the podcast, that sort of how broad a player is or how wide a player is in defense is just really, really helpful. Would you extend that to your midfielders though as well? Because I think that's an area which is a bit more contested, whether you should have a big midfielder or not.
With the German cross, you do need like players that are capable to head the ball. So it's always important to have, it depends on what you play, because if you play 4-4-2, 4-3-2-1, 4-2-3-1, you do need two mobile midfielders. I think the game has evolved into you needing two midfielders who can actually move off the ball. I think the likes of Vieira are over for a midfield role in FIFA now these days. So I think you do need two capable midfielders who can move. So they have to have decent agility, balance, and dribbling nowadays.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Japes, what about you, body type wise?
Laurent Blanc is probably like my ideal body type. I don't know what those are, but he just because of like the way he like moves or looks or whatever, he always seems to like far outperform his stats.
Yeah.
I think he's like pretty big. So he's probably in that 6'4", like high average frame setup. So that's probably what I look for.
Same as Lucio. Yeah.
Yeah. Outside backs, I like really, really like Cafu.
Yeah. I agree.
Cafu is a baller, man.
Do you have him on lengthy actually, or something I was going to ask?
No, I have him on controlled. I don't know what his body type is, but he's just like awesome. Like he's awesome. In midfielders, it can depend. I mean, I will say I've grown like pretty fond of having Vieira at the moment, but he's kind of got spider legs.
Oh, really?
Well, once I asked Vieira to just be like chill in the middle of the park and not do too much, other than try to intercept passes, I was like, yeah, you're all right. Yeah. Other than that, I like the average body type too, probably. Like I really enjoyed the World Cup Schweinsteiger when I had him. And I also like adore Bruno Guimaraes. Like he is so good. And I think both of those, I think both of them are average too.
Yeah, we need a bit more time to do it, but I'd like to talk a bit more about body types and the terminology and how there's a bit of confusion around what is and isn't kind of physically imposing and things like that. But we can go into that in the future. In terms of 𝘬𝘀𝘀𝘁, though, considering he isn't actually that different in terms of body type he isn't different to 𝘭𝘺io, what do you think it is that makes him not so good?
He feels a little... like for how good his stats are and how fast he is, he just feels like his brain is like a little bit AFK sometimes, and he doesn't have the knack for like, I don't know, like he doesn't feel like a presence at the back for me.
Exactly, which is why I mentioned him in the CB discussion. He's fast, he's good. Generally, he makes tackles as he should, but he does like lack that awareness at the back, whereas the OP players like Lucio, the Varane and stuff do have. He tends to forget his defensive duties at times.
Yeah, he's actually, I mean, I should defend the pound for pound powerhouse nomination that I made on the content podcast this week because, I mean, because he's like 50k now, it is mad how good he is for the price.
That is true.
But at the same time, I think lacking just a bit of defensive awareness because it's not maxed out. So many centre backs now have maxed out defensive awareness, and the 88 aggression, he's not going to be quite as aggressive. Compare him to Diaz, who has that 99 aggression, 99 strength, I think it is. Yeah, stupidly good for the price, but maybe not quite there. One player a lot of people are loving and is extremely meta is that 𝘬𝘃𝗲𝗏.
Oh,
have you used any of his versions, CJ? Because I've been menaced by him many times over the last week.
I actually got him as a red pick.
Ooh.
I haven't tried him yet, though.
Yeah,
they told me that he's decent, especially I was watching, whose stream was it? I was watching some pro player stream and he was saying, I love this 𝘬𝘃𝗏 guy. And he was so hyped when he packed him since he used him the whole weekend. So I'm pretty curious to see how good he is.
Yeah, he's tough to play against. Actually, the question about body type, it'd be interesting to move on to more attacking players. How does that work for you? Because when I played you, I noticed you had a lot of very small, fast, nippy players, which is kind of what has been the meta for a while. Even though this year it feels like your lengthy attackers do have some kind of extra, I guess, use this year. They are effective, but I guess maybe not at a pro level.
When we played, I had, who did I have? I had 𝘵𝑚bappé, 𝘭𝘵𝗆𝑚𝑏𝑃𝗀, 𝘬𝘕𝑚aximin, and 𝘭𝑪𝑬𝘍.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't really enjoy 𝘭𝘵𝗆𝑚𝑏𝑃𝗀. That's what you think that people would enjoy him.
That's FUT birthday 𝘬𝘵𝗆𝑚𝑏𝑃𝗀, right?
Yeah, that is FUT birthday.
I mean, I can say that I didn't enjoy him either playing against him. he was annoying to play against, but he was like 7 million coins not so long ago.
Yeah, I bought him for 10. I was so excited. I bought him for 10. I didn't even wait a week, but he's disappointing me massively. The thing is, he's not as quick. We've come to a stage where pace just matters. It's just too important. If your guy's not over 95, 96, 97 pace, you feel the difference between that 𝘵𝑚bappé, 𝘭𝑪𝑬𝘍, and 𝘭𝘵𝗆𝘏. That just matters, especially with the first time through ball meta, I feel.
Yeah, it's a weird one with the FUT birthday 𝘬𝘵𝗆𝑚𝑏𝑃𝗀 because he is 90 ball control and you can't really boost both pace and ball control with chemistry styles. In fact, you can't. So getting him to max pace and higher ball control, basically impossible. So I can see why that would be a bit awkward. Before we finish up, Japes, do you have any questions for CJ?
Like a good question for the listeners would be which skill or mechanic do you wish you'd learned sooner because you found it to be exponentially more beneficial than some of the others?
That's a very, very good question. I have to think about this one.
Could I quickly interject with something that you might say? Because maybe you've been using it for a long time, but you used a lot of player lock in the game we played.
Yeah.
And it seemed fairly effective. Was that something you picked up quite early, or?
The player lock is something I've been doing since the introduction of it. When was it? 21? Is it 21? Yeah, I think that was when the player lock got introduced.
Okay.
So I've always been the type of person who used the player locks because I feel like my players don't run where I want them to run. We were complementing the offensive AI when they were triggered just before, but the offensive AI isn't as good as we were saying. That's why the player lock is a good feature. The creative run as well is a good feature as well that allows you to position your players where you want them to be. For example, you trigger the run, you creative run them back post, you're countering, you want to send Ronaldo back post while you're running, you creative run them back post. Those are mechanics that I feel are very underrated, that certain casuals either don't know about or don't think about. So if I was to recommend something, probably learn those two, the player logs and the creative run.
Yeah.
Those two,
Yeah, sorry, slightly hijack the question a little bit, but is there anything that you actually, as Japes was saying, like you didn't learn or pick up early, and you feel like is a good thing for people to give a go?
Probably the different exits you get on step overs. For example, I learned like not too long ago, the more you like wait before you exit a step over, you get a better animation. Which is something I did not know. I used to step over all the time, like step over exit in front of you. But the more you like step over and you wait for the right moment to exit, whether inside or outside, it gives you that better animation to then exit with the shot. That's what I learned that was pretty effective that I did not know, let's say 2 months, 3 months ago.
Yeah, well, that's a good, a good tip. I guess there's probably plenty of tutorials out there if people want to kind of hone that skill. Step over is definitely, I don't know, for me, one of the more frustrating mechanics to play against.
Well, they're just not used the way you would expect them to be used in real life. Like they're used for the speed boost.
Yeah, it's like mad to think people in real life would be like, oh, let me just drop a step over here to accelerate faster.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. But anyway, lots of still positive mechanics that have been introduced that I'd encourage people to mess around with, like power shot and player lock is really good as well. And we should probably wrap up on that. It's been great to have you on, 𝘵𝘃. Really interesting chat today. And yeah, best of luck with competitive FIFA. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great. And where can people catch you? I know you do stream and tweet and things like that.
𝘵𝘃 __ on Twitch, Instagram, same thing, 𝘵𝘃, and Twitter as well, 𝘵𝘃, all those.
Nice. And thank you very much as well to Japes. Been great to have you on.
Yeah, of course. Really enjoyed this chat. You know, excited to maybe put some of those tips into play myself, or perhaps I'll just end up focusing on all the things we talked about that we didn't love while I'm playing FIFA instead, and that'll occupy my brain space, which only sends us in one direction. So, you know, we'll see. We'll have to tune in next week to see how that plays out for me.
#bring back Path to Power.
Perhaps not this year, but maybe new franchise, new Path to Power. Never know. And if people would like more Japes content, he was on the Content Podcast this week, the supporter episode, and on last week's gameplay podcast, that supporter episode. In fact, you can go back and listen to past week's gameplay episodes from this entire cycle over on Patreon, as well as supporting the podcast. You'll get access to that 36,000 FIFA point giveaway that's going on for Team of the Season. And there's loads more there too. You can head over to bit.ly/TOTS23 in caps, or just search support for weekly, or follow the link in the description of this podcast. And if you are watching on YouTube, do drop a like, leave a comment and subscribe. It helps a lot. And if you're a supporter, then a huge thank you for supporting FUT Weekly, keeping it going, making it weekly, twice weekly for supporters. And a big thank you too to those icon patrons: Dave B, 𝘬𝘃, Coach 𝘵𝘱, DJ FIFA Player, Alan G, Alistair, Anthony R, Dominic P, Rob P, Jeff B, Stephen F, Tom B, Damon H, David S, Nick Jack M, Eric T, Neil P, Adam G, Dan W, Waterman, N Hagman, Harry A, Jake G, Roger D, Springford, Elec, Bracco, Nishant, Harry P, Alex M, Lee A, Brendan W, Andrew C, Joe W, Timothy J, Dylan, J Kell, 𝘵𝘃𝗰𝘀, Adam R, Sam K, Graham W, Andy, Ads H2K, and Brian V. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, 𝘬𝘃, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add, though. FIFA's a bit like life, really. It has its many ups and its many downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.